Here at the Nivlak 57 YouTube channel, we've dynoed quite a few cars. So as you can imagine, we've learned a thing or two. Gas is expensive these days, and making 2 trips to the dyno when you could have made it in 1 sucks no matter what. So today we're going to talk about 5 tips and tricks that we recommend you follow to go to the dyno. Now number 1, this is something that probably some people struggle with. Unless you already have an agreed upon arrangement with your tuner, make sure the car runs. The most important thing about running is, does it idle stably? When you rev the thing up and let off the throttle, does it return to idle gracefully or does it stall? If it stalls, you really need to fix that issue. For a lot of cars, if you were to stall the car at the top of your dyno pool, it could do serious damage to your transmission. So it is very important that you run the car through its paces, and if it's a street car, it can be really useful to take it for a short drive and just see how the thing generally runs. If it's a race car like this, and you have the ability, doing some driveway test shots is also very valuable. During those test shots, you can see, does it have oil pressure? Does the oil pressure increase with RPM? Are your fuel pumps keeping up? Does it sound like the engine is laboring? If you build boost on the trans brake and let go and it doesn't immediately spring to life, you might have something wrong that's worth investigating before you waste a whole bunch of time and money at the dyno. Also, after your tests, it may be a good idea to take your filter off and cut it open and see if there's any metal particulates. If it's a fresh engine build, sometimes it's common for a little bit of metal, but if you see excessive metal, it may be a good time to just stop, call off the appointment, and save everybody some time and effort on something that's not going to be successful. Another great thing to do before the dyno is check that all your outputs from your ECU are functioning correctly. A lot of ECUs have a manual test mode where you can individually trigger outputs to turn on or off, and you can just go through and make sure that your boost controller is clicking and your water pump comes on and whatever else might be controlled by the ECU. Also along the same lines, look at all your inputs. Does it look like the coolant temp is reading right? Manifold temp. Is your throttle position sensor working? One more thing that you can do before the dyno, if you're really serious, is you can do a compression test and a leak down test. This will give you a baseline of all the cylinders on your engine, and you can monitor them if you think an issue is developing, and it may help you in diagnosing any issues after the fact. If your dyno is not like right down the street, forgetting things really sucks. We have definitely been there quite a few times where we're halfway to the dyno and it's, I forgot my tuning laptop. So I've come up with a pretty short list of some things you should bring to the dyno if you want to be successful. So in no particular order, did you bring fuel? If you plan to switch from pump gas to ethanol, did you bring ethanol? If your dyno is not well equipped, it may be a good idea to bring some hand tools, sockets, that sort of thing, in case you need to work on the thing. Another great thing to have at the dyno are extra spark plugs. You may want to read the spark plug to see where the timing mark on your ground strap is, and it can be really useful to be able to throw another fresh spark plug in it and just see where things are at. I know these things can be expensive, but bringing an extra set of injectors, some ignition coils, maybe even a spare ECU for the guys that can swing it. These can save your butt if you have some freak issue and you burn up a injector driver or something silly like that. Also, bring extra oil. You should be checking oil frequently throughout your dyno session, and say you were to develop a leak, it may be nice to just throw a little more in there and get you through the day and fix the leak a little later. Same thing with transmission fluid. For the turbo guys, it is really helpful to maybe bring an extra wastegate. If you blow a diaphragm or blow a valve seal or something like that, it's always nice to be able to throw a fresh one on there. I should have mentioned this when I mentioned spark plugs, but bring a spark plug gapping tool. As you go throughout the day and you're turning up the power, you may find that it starts to have ignition breakup issues. It's really useful to be able to gap the spark plugs down accurately. Another great tool to have is an infrared temp gun. You may get to a point in the day where the thing's not really running right, and having a temp gun to shoot each of your exhaust ports to see if it's firing on all cylinders is really useful. Also, bringing extra sensors like O2 sensors, map sensors, throttle position sensors, what have you, could also save your dyno day. Another thing is you never know if you might have to jerry rig something, so having some zip ties, duct tape, hose clamps, or whatever else you may need to band-aid the thing back together, that can make or break meeting your power goals or having to come back another day. Another thing that I am guilty of is I've forgotten my tuning laptop before, and I've also forgotten my tuning cable to hook into the ECU. This is both embarrassing and kind of ruins your day. Also, if you plan to share the session with your friends or maybe your YouTube channel, bringing your camera equipment, SD cards, microphones, whatever else you may need to film the session, definitely gonna need those. Another thing that's commonly forgotten is hearing protection. Cars that make a lot of horsepower make a lot of noise too, and I really recommend that you wear earmuffs because it's nice to be able to take them on and off really easily, and earplugs can be kind of annoying for that. One last thing that is frequently forgotten is lunch. A lot of times the dyno session tends to go a little longer than what you expect, and I don't know about you guys, but my mind doesn't really function as well on an empty stomach than when I'm on a full stomach, so bring a sandwich. Also, bring some water. And do yourself a favor and take care of your body. It's not all about the car at a dyno day. Next, we're gonna go into safety. Some safety things that we always look over before we do a dyno session is torquing the lug nuts. While you're torquing the lug nuts, it may be a good idea to just go over every nut and bolt in the car. Nobody likes having things rattle loose and causing issues. Another thing to check are all your fuel fittings tight? Also, give all your vacuum lines a good once over, especially with a turbo car. Another thing that's commonly overlooked is your tires. You need to check that your tires are both in good condition, but are also rated for the speeds that you're going to be spinning them to. Another thing is have a good plan for tying down the car. You want to have a good spot to latch onto the car that is not going to break off and have the car come off of the dyno. Along this same line, if you have a front-wheel drive car, you need to be worried about strapping that thing down even more than a rear-wheel drive car. That is because the drive wheels can be steered. You got to make sure that you have lots of straps on the front of the thing so that if something gets bumped or who knows, you're not steering off of the dyno and causing yourself pain. Our next tip is to make sure that you have realistic goals. There is a reason why you see at so many dynos in America, Dream Killer Boulevard or Soul Crushing Lane. A lot of times people have this unreal expectation of what their car actually makes, and when they stick it on the dyno, they're kind of disappointed. Now, I will say some dynos do read low. We have a pretty infamous one in our area, and you'll see 800 horsepower cars only make 400 horsepower, but for the most part, if you have a reputable dyno service, it will give you an accurate number. That being said, too many people get way too focused on what the number is. We use the dyno like a hammer or any other tool. Your goal is to take the horsepower that you came in the door with and get as much more out of it as you safely can. Therefore, the number that you leave with doesn't really matter. Well, it does, but what we really get out of a dyno session is the delta of the horsepower that you leave with minus the horsepower that you came with. Our last tip for the day is something that we don't see a lot of people do, and I think it's part of one of the things that makes us so successful, and that is take notes. Treat the dyno session like a change log. Every time you make another pull, you should be taking notes. What did you change? And then after the pull, what happened? What horsepower did it make? What torque did it make? Did you experience anything that was out of the ordinary? Did you have to shut off early? This can make it so much easier to keep track of what changes actually made a difference. And a lot of times when you're dealing with a car that has so many systems like this one, it can really help with figuring out, okay, did the change to the VVT or did the extra pound of boost make that extra 5 horsepower? As you get further and further in the day, a lot of times we'll make 20 dyno pulls in a day, and going back to the beginning and being able to see, oh, we changed this here and it resulted in this, can be extremely helpful. Also, it is a good idea to write down all of your vitals. This will, one, remind you to actually check your vitals, but also you can see if there's a trend. Is your oil pressure getting lower and lower and lower with every pull? This may explain why the car is not making the horsepower you expect. So you might call me a nerd for it, but taking notes can really save your day. So with that, we're going to end the video off here. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you got some use out of this video. We've definitely had our fair share of experience, and I hope that you can take some of the information from today and apply it to your dyno session and come out with more success. The reason that we are making this video is because we are very close to taking this car to the dyno. But you're gonna have to wait to see that in the next video, so make sure that you like and subscribe. Maybe ring the bell so that you get notifications when we release a new video. Also, if you want to hit the join button down below and support us monetarily, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm really excited to see what this thing will make, but for that, we'll have to see you in the next one. One last thing before we end the video today, we finally have shirts for sale. On the left, you'll notice that we have our 6 is greater than 8 shirt. This is sort of an homage to the Clifford Performance logo, but we think that the Atlas is a little bit greater than some of the 8 cylinders out there, so we made some alterations. On the right, we have our Atlas engine shirt. I think it's a really neat design, so make sure you guys go check it out. Links are in the description. All right, we'll see you in the next one, guys.